Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for listening in. My name is Linda Mooney. This is Other Worlds of Romance, and I am so delighted that I have back Juli D Revezzo. Hi, Julie. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you, Linda?
Oh, doing great. I'm enjoying the wind. I'm finally getting some fall weather down here in Texas, but I understand that down in Florida, it's not so cool for y'all?
No, not quite. The news tonight says it's 71 degrees, and that's still a little bit too warm for this time of year.
A little too warm. Yeah. So, Julie's going to be reading from Druid's Warrior Heart, which is book 2 of her Celtic Stewards Chronicles. Now, if you've listened before to Blog Talk Radio, you know that about a year ago, she was here with book 1, Passion's Sacred Dance. If you want to listen to that excerpt, all you have to do is go to Blog Talk Radio and put in Passion's Sacred Dance, or you can even type in Juli D Revezzo, JuliRevezzo, and her shows will come up. And then, like 2 years before that, you were here with the Artist's Inheritance, which is using witches, whereas now you've got Druids and Celtics and all with this group. And what I thought was really interesting is the fact that when I went to go look at, I was looking at your cover, and I went, that's intriguing. And when I went and looked, you've changed your covers on your books.
Yes, I have.
And good-looking guys on the book, on the covers.
Well, thank you.
And, if you'd like to talk to Julie after she gets through reading from Druid Warrior's Heart, please do. Our call-in number is 646-727-2932, or you can go to the chat room and you can listen in there, and you can, if you have a question, you can ask the question there, and I'd be more than happy to relay it. Or you can email me your question, linda@lindamooney.com, and I'd be more than happy to relay the question. And we're going to go with this Druid Warrior's Heart. Now, I want to ask you a real quick question. How many books are you going to have in this series? Do you have any idea yet?
I believe there are going to be either 5 or 6. I haven't decided on that middle one yet. The series follows a family throughout the entire world history. It started out, in Celtic mythology, there was a battle that happened between the two sets of gods. And in the mythology, there were 2 battles. This story takes off after the end of the second battle. There's a third battle. And when they got done with that battle, the guy that lost said, no, I don't like this. So we're gonna just keep fighting indefinitely until I win. And the good guys were like, no. So they fight every 500 years to see, and if the good guys win, everything's okay for another 500 years, and until the bad guy can't stand it anymore and takes over. Not takes over, but decides to fight against them again. If the bad guy wins, we're in a peck of trouble. The family, this particular family knows the history of these wars, but in the first book, it happened during our time. In Passion's Sacred Dance, it happened during our time, and the girl who is supposed to be the overseer of the battle doesn't really believe that this ever happened. So they have to convince her, yeah, it did, and by the way, we need your land to fight our battles. So she's got to learn and decide who to give it to. in this book, I went back 500 years to the last steward, is what they're called, and she knows about it, and she's just hoping it doesn't happen in her lifetime. Well, if it doesn't happen, there's no book. So, poor thing, she has to fight a battle.
Oh my goodness! Now, let me give a little bio to our listeners there.
Sorry.
No. I kind of got off track because I got really excited about your book. Julie is a Florida girl, as we mentioned, with a love of speculative and romantic fiction and legend, and she loves writing stories with all kinds of fantastical elements. She is the author of the Antique Magic series and the paranormal romance Celtic Stewards Chronicles series, which we are talking about tonight. She also has a new adult romance, Changeling's Crown, and many short stories. She's also a member of the Independent Author Network and the Magic Appreciation Tour. Tell me about the Magic Appreciation Tour real quick.
Well, it's a group of fantasy writers who basically get together and support each other. We do, if one of our members needs a spot for like a blog post, we'll all jump out and say, okay, we have space, you can be on my blog whatever day. And it's run by Daniel Marvello, who is a fantasy writer himself and really like high fantasy Tolkien-esque type stuff. And he just got a group of us together and said, why don't we just all support each other? And so we have. I mean,
sounds good.
Yeah, he's a very good writer, and he's just an all around really nice guy.
Shout out there!
He writes the I believe it's pronounced Vaetra, Vaetra series Chronicles, something like that. You put me on the spot. I didn't know you were going to ask me about Daniel. Hi, Daniel. In case he's listening. So yeah, that's basically what that is. I've been with them for a couple of years now. They're just a really nice bunch of people. Marcia A. Moore is part of it, and
Louise
Blankenship. Yeah. So that's basically our little group.
Oh, that's
very nice.
That sounds very interesting.
Talented authors.
Yeah, and I love the fact that these are authors supporting other authors. You know, because this is one of the few, I won't say jobs, because basically writing is a job. You know, it's also a love affair, so to speak, but it's also a job. But it's one of the few where authors support each other, and you know, they're more than willing to help share, because it's just a wonderful thing where you don't feel like you're in any kind of race, or you know, to have, you know, the better book than another person. It's just everybody's taste is so different. There's room for everybody, and I love the way that authors support each other. All right, let's go back to Druid's Warrior Heart, because I'm going to turn the floor over to you, and you can tell us a little bit more about what this one's like. You can read the blurb, and then I'm anxious to start hearing the excerpt from it. So, Julie, the floor is yours, so take it away.
Okay. Well, Druid Warrior's Heart, as I said earlier, it's the series, the Celtic Stewards Chronicles, goes backwards in time to cover all the different stewards. There were about 5 from the beginning of time, maybe 6, maybe more. There's a whole swath of time in there that I'm like, I don't know if I want to cover everybody. But this particular one, Druid Warrior's Heart, follows the daughter in the 1500s. 1513 is the year the battle takes place, and her name is Ruth. So she's expecting this warrior to show up sometime, but she doesn't exactly know what's going to happen or when, and she's just kind of hoping it skips her generation. But it doesn't, and some bad things happen, and these men show up to her property and say to her father and say, we need your property. And he's like, no. So they fight this little skirmish, and Ruth sees all this happening, the main character, and she runs off to get help, and she meets the guy who's going to be her hero, Isaac. And by the time they get back, the guys who work for the bad guy have destroyed her property and killed her father. And so she's stunned, and she's kind of in shock, and she's wishing that none of this happened, but you know, it has. So now she's got to deal with all that. Not only is her father dead, but her brother is missing, and her mother's not all there. She's kind of lost her marbles. So the rest of her family show up for her father's funeral, and they decide that she has to leave, that she and her mother have to leave. They can't stay on this property anymore. I mean, this was the 1500s. Young women just couldn't stay alone and care for property. And she's like, well, this is the sacred ground. If I leave and these guys come back, we're in a heap of trouble. I cannot leave. So Isaac is one of the Celtic warriors. The Tuatha De Danaan are a group of gods, but in my story, they oversee this whole army that fights against their enemies. And they build the army by picking young men that they think will be able to handle this ongoing battle century after century, and they give them like a sort of immortality. So Isaac is one of these guys, and he's fought these battles several times by this point. He doesn't ever tell her exactly when he got started, but it's like, 3 million years ago or something.
Wow.
So he's done this a couple of times. He's never actually been chosen to oversee the girl. Every time there's a battle, one of the warriors is chosen to officially guard the steward, because if anything happens to the steward, if anything happens to one of these Macken girls, that's part of what gets us in trouble. So he has to guard her. So he's already kicking himself that he couldn't do anything to save this poor man. So the father's been killed, the mother's lost her marbles, the brother's gone. And they've gone through the funeral, and Ruth doesn't know what's next. So that's what I'm going to read tonight, if that's all right.
Okay. All right. Now, but do the Macken girls, do any of them have any basic powers or abilities or something, or are they just sort of like?
Well, they're sort of. Their property is, it's been walked over by the gods so often that they've given it certain blessings that if things go bad and we do actually lose this war, this family has got to survive. If this family doesn't survive, that's the end of humanity. So they've enchanted it in a way that it will grow whatever they need to grow. It doesn't matter what the weather is like. So Ruth has been kind of endowed with this throughout her family, throughout her DNA, that she can just walk out her back door, and if she wants an apple off the tree in the middle of December, there'll be an apple on the tree. She can just reach up and pluck it down. Yeah. They also have a grove, a thorn grove, that has these weird powers that it can grow up around the house and like in Sleeping Beauty, and protect the family if necessary. It would be this huge bramble that somebody would have to get through to get to them. So she's kind of picked up a little bit of farming magic, I guess, from that. She also has, she doesn't know for sure, but she has a bit of magic that she can use by, like braiding string or, making yarn. She does a little bit of that, but she doesn't do it consciously. She just kind of sits there and, oh, gosh, I hope this battle goes well. I hope so-and-so doesn't die and so-and-so doesn't die, But as far as the actual magic in the book, a lot of that is done by the warriors and by the druids that come with them, who keep their records and who kind of fill in the blanks for her as she goes along throughout the story, and do a lot of the healing when they need it, and of course the battle spells. To help the warriors.
All right.
Okay.
I want to hear an excerpt. Here we go.
Okay. All right. So we're starting out after the funeral. This is when they get back home after the funeral.
Okay.
Though the funeral dirge still rang in her ears, her mother, aunt, and uncle spoke to each other in low tones all the way home. When they reached the front gate, Ruth frowned. The front gate, whose hinges still squeaked, no matter that Father had oiled them recently. Her aunt threaded her arm around her as Ruth wiped her running nose on her handkerchief. "Sweet dear," her aunt said, sympathy heavy in her voice, "you've no need to worry about leaving the farm. Who knows, by summer we may be planning your wedding. And you'll have your husband's land to fuss over." "What?" Ruth wiped tears out of her eyes. "What do you mean, leave the farm?" "You can't stay here alone," her aunt said, leading her into the house. "Pack some things to take with you, too." "I think they'd fare best at Barbara's," Dermot said. Dermot is one of the druids. "Yes, your mother's sister," Marisol said. "Whatever you need, we'll wait for you here, but hurry, the sun is going down." Ruth couldn't believe her ears. Leave? Were they mad? Should she stay? She won't be alone, Cyrith said, sympathy in her eyes. Cyrith is the main druid. "I'll gladly remain and help her attend to the land." "You?" Mother said. Geralt and Mother shared a glance. Geralt spoke, down heavy in his voice. "I don't know. I think it would be best if you make for Barbara's." Ruth considered the situation. If she stayed here, could she handle the farm on her own? She would need help with the cattle, and as for protecting the land, she wielded a knife well enough, but if she faced more than one man, or a god, on the other hand, to leave, she considered Isaac and his friends. Sure, they might be Harshad warriors. That's what they're called. Because the battles happen every 500 years. 500 is a Harshad number. So I just took the name. Okay. Sure, they might be Harshad warriors, but they'd not spoken the request she expected yet. If she left, how could Isaac make the request? In a letter? She glanced at her mother. Had they ever written such an exchange, such permission down? I can't. If Lonan comes, or something worse, and no one is here, he'll worry, and have great cause to. If their enemy arrived and no one was here to stop them taking possession of the land, what would happen? Did one of them have to physically say yea or nay? She'd always thought so. "I have a sister coming in from out of town," Cyrith said. "She'd welcome a place to stay." "A sister?" Mother said. "Well, I trust she will welcome the arrangement. Can you handle 2 boarders?" Cyrith asked. Ruth surveyed her home with new eyes. They'd taken in boarders before. 2 was no burden, but if the Harshad warriors arrived, how many was she to expect? Ruth turned to Cyrith. "I'd be happy to have you," she said, "and your sister. Extra hands are always welcome." Isaac and Dermot shared a glance. This might not be the safest place for you now, Isaac said. It was obvious he knew the importance of this land, and yet he suggested she leave, though it made sense to seek shelter. Ruth knew her duty, and so clenched her fists and refused. "No, I'm sorry. No, I'm not leaving." Her uncle scowled in a way that proved he thought her not only succumbed to grief, but possibly out of her wits. "You can't stay here alone, child," he argued, "even with boarders. It's not safe. He's right, James said. James is her neighbor who's been trying to get her to marry him so he can take possession of the land. He doesn't know any of this, what's at stake, but he's always liked her, and he's always liked that she's got this huge piece of land. She likes him, but she doesn't want to marry him. So he keeps butting in, and it starts to get on Isaac's nerves, because Isaac is her warrior. He's the guy that she's going to end up falling in love with and marrying, but James is always there and kind of poking at him. So he says, well, he's right, it's not safe. Ruth narrowed her eyes at him. This is none of your business. Maybe so, James continued, but you know nothing of the men who caused this. Men, she snorted. She suspected she knew all she needed to know about the murderers. Men or no men, she said. As I said, someone must stay and take care of the word sacred ground filled her mind. She wouldn't say that with James standing by our home. The sun slanted across the floor. It wouldn't be long before it was down for the night. I've spent too long today doing nothing, she said. She shivered and decided to build the fire anew, took up a small broom and swept last night's embers into a pile as she continued. If you don't mind, I have work to do and little light left to do it in. Could she tend to everything with no aid? You've done more than enough for me today. She gulped. I can't keep you any longer. Go home. Uncle Gerard shook his head. It's no trouble, you know that. I will be fine, Uncle, she said. James is nearby, the man argued. James nodded vigorously. I can see to anything that needs doing here, Ruth. No, she said, thank you. For some reason, he was the last person she wanted in charge of her land. God forbid he should give it to anyone who happened along. Please, I need to do something. She stood and plucked a small pot from the hook over the fire. She'd need to start dinner. If she had no appetite, surely Cyrith was hungry. You understand, don't you? It's too dangerous, her aunt said. You'll come with us. And what of my brother? Ruth asked. What if he returns and finds no one here? She shook her head. He won't know to follow us. To act as messenger wasn't her only reason to stay. I'll tell him where to meet you, James said. I'll escort him to you myself if I have to. Ruth's lip twitched. Poor James. He so wanted to help. He so wants your land, she reminded herself. But he was no Harshad warrior, and she held out for one. Her gaze strayed to Isaac. Was she wrong about him? Had she imagined what she'd seen on the stairs yesterday? No, someone must stay here and guard our land. With Lonan gone, there's no other choice. Geralt plucked his cloak from his chair with a sigh. I will check in on you first thing in the morning. Isaac's brow rose, but finally he nodded. In the meantime, it will be my honor to guard her. He must, for what human fighter could so completely annihilate an opponent like he had? What human soldier would face something so horrific and not go mad? Was that not proof of what Isaac was? Isaac loomed over James. Though Isaac wasn't much taller than James, he engulfed her old friend. She hoped she hadn't made the wrong choice. A gust of breeze blew in through a small gap under the door, chilling her. Did the day grow colder, or was it her imagination? Isaac frowned, and she kicked at the floorboards. Lonan shouldn't be long, she said. He's probably delayed listening to the priest's lectures right now, or maybe he's with that Kylie girl, the one he was in love with, she hoped. He will come home before the hour is up, I'm sure, and when he arrives, I'll send him after you. If those men returned, if they killed her, so be it. She would not abandon the land to thieves, or worse. Isaac sighed and rubbed his forehead as he turned to her family. Take Lady Macken and see her to safety. We'll wait here. Whether it's good sense or not, I agree with Mistress Macken. She probably shouldn't leave the farm unattended. Uncle Gerard paused, and his gaze traveled over Isaac to Dermot. I trust you to guard her tonight. He touched her cheek. Be well, my stubborn little lass, he said, and marched out the door. Her mother protested, but Dermot and the ever-helpful James convinced her to accompany him home. I'll be fine, Mother. Mother looked to Isaac. We know nothing of them. They come from the priest, and they've likely saved our lives. Ruth said, is there a better reason to trust them? One cannot count on men. Only Harshad warriors deserve our trust, daughter, Mother said. Remember that. She suspected Isaac fit that bill. I will. Now go. God willing, this will pass us by, and I will see you by and by. Mother touched her forehead to Ruth. I will hope for that then. Let's see. With these borders, you'll need supplies, Mother protested. Beyond that, you will need help caring for the cattle. I'll help her, James volunteered and frowned at Isaac. Them. Ruth sighed. No, James, go home. I'll be fine. James pushed his hat back and peered closely at Isaac. I'm watching you. Understand that. Isaac nodded. You've nothing to fear from me. All right, then. I can help with the cattle, Isaac said. Dermot winked at her. He wasn't always a brave warrior. He knows how to handle a cow or two, and sheep. The way he said it made us doubt he meant in handling them in the usual way. Don't lie to the lass, Dermot. Ruth laughed at the two, which caused Isaac to smile. It's good to hear you laugh, lass. She was sure she blushed as welcome. This has been a hard day. Let's see. Dermot looked down at Isaac. I'll send you word when we arrive. I await your update, Isaac said, crossing his arms over his chest. An update of what? Ruth wondered. His lip curled into a quick, sheepish grin. He cleared his throat. Ruth sighed heavily and entered her home. She never had to care for the farm on her own. A strange loneliness tugged at her as she stoked the fire for dinner. Would Mother ever come back, she wondered, and where was her brother?
Did we ever find out where her brother? What happened to her brother?
Well, if I tell you that.
Oh,
yeah,
never mind.
We do. The girl that I mentioned, he's sort of with her, but not. Well, let me see if I can find that part. No, if I read that, I'll give it away.
Well, okay, we're running short of time here. We're running short of time.
I'm sorry.
No. But we have a question. Oh, we have two questions. I got an email from Debbie R, and she says, "Do you write historical romances?"
This is actually the first one that I've released. This has a lot more fantasy-oriented stuff in it than a normal historical would. But I've written ones in the past that are similar to this. They have a lot of fantasy mixed in with the historical. I have one that I'm working on now. It's more of a gothic historical. I'm not sure when it's going to come out, though. It's going to be sometime this next year, I hope.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see.
Michelle wants to know what's book 3.
Book 3 is going to be. In the first book, she covers the main character Stacy covers a lot of the history of the family. But there's one generation that she doesn't know anything about that happened in 500 A.D. And that's going to be the story of the third book. Because that's
what's the title of it?
Druid Warrior Prince.
Oh, okay.
Because her particular warrior at that time was a prince in his earlier life. Nobody that we know, but he was a prince of his particular tribe. And it ends in such a way that the Druids have to change history. What we as a human race know of history is all due to their Druids. If they write it down, then we know it. If they don't write it down, then we don't know it. Well, this particular battle got written out of history, quote unquote. So that one, that's going to be the third book.
And when is it going to be out?
Well, I'm hoping, I'm working on the second draft of it now, so I'm hoping I can get it out sometime before next Christmas.
Oh, super.
Yeah. Between
so
that, I've got
what have you got coming out? What's your next one coming out? What's your next book?
My next one coming out will be the fourth title in my Antique Magic series. My paranormal fantasy. series about the witches. They live in North Florida, and the main character has every book she has a ghost that comes to her and says, "Okay, I have this problem. You need to help me." Yeah, and in this particular new one that's going to come out, I hope in February. I hope. It's this little girl comes up to her and says, "This is my grandmother's locket. Can you give it back to her?" And the main character goes, "Well, where's your grandmother?" She says, "Well, she died." And the main character is like, okay. Takes the locket back to her husband, who owns an antique shop, and says, "Help! What do we do?"
Yeah. So wow.
They don't know anything about the grandmother, and they have to go find out her name and her whole story, and So.
Well, Julie, it has been a thrill to have you on the show, and I want to hear more about this. The book number 4 in your Antique Magic series. So I want you to come back and give us a taste of that one when it finally comes out. How about that?
I definitely will. That sounds like fun.
It sounds like it's going to be really neat. But anyway, like I said, thank you for coming back on the show, and I'm looking forward to having you again. To the readers who wrote in, thank you for coming, for listening in and sending us your questions. My name is Linda Mooney. This is Other Worlds of Romance. We'll see you again. And, Julie, have a wonderful Christmas holiday. And you take care. And I hope you get nice and cold down there in Florida.
No, not too cold. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice
Thank you again.
And
nice talking to you. And we'll see you again next time. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.